Thank you, Anthony. All right, we just got the 5 p.m. advisory in, and before we get into all of the numbers, I can tell you there has been no big change. Maybe a slight shift of 6 miles farther west down south and just about right on up north. The concern for at least a strong tropical storm scenario working northward. The size of the wind field has the coastal areas of the Gulf Coast under concern, but basically the headline is we're still looking at a major hurricane, winds of 125, so technically a Category 3, but the forecast is for it to re-intensify. In fact, every time we get these advisories in, not only do we have the position, but we also have the pressure, and the pressure continues to drop. And typically, after a while, the winds will just catch up to what the pressure is doing. That's why the National Hurricane Center is forecasting this again to become a Category 4. And just that slight shift, though, means that not only the Naples area, but Fort Myers as well, with a major storm surge. Now, with it heading north this way, just right over Tampa, that means Tampa wouldn't have quite the double-digit storm surge initially, but then once the hurricane goes by, they're going to have quite the event, especially getting up into Tampa Bay. I would say the main positive for the Tampa Bay area is that this hurricane, once it starts moving north, and this is where the computer models absolutely agree, and it makes sense because of that front that we've been talking about, it's going to race to the north in a pretty quick clip. In fact, notice this, going from a Category 3/2 on the coast near Clearwater to then down to a 1 as it crosses I-10, and then the hurricane force winds shrinking as well. In fact, we just checked it out. The official forecast is for once it makes it to I-10, the hurricane force winds will extend west of the I by only about 30 miles and east of the I only about 40 miles. So it's a small core left of hurricane force winds. I want to say that again. Catastrophic down south. Once it makes it to North Florida, it's still going to be a major event, but this line doesn't mean it's going to be catastrophic. We're going to see a rapid weakening, no doubt about it. We'll watch to see if in fact that happens, and you should prepare for the worst for those of you out toward Columbia County. Think out toward the Suwannee River Valley, but it looks like it will go pretty rapidly to a hurricane after being a major hurricane. All right, so let's zoom in a little bit closer here. So here is the track. You can see why certainly their concern is around Tallahassee. Is it going to weaken that fast? Is Tallahassee really going to stay on the weak side of the system? At the very least, I think Tallahassee will have enough widespread winds of maybe up to near 50 miles per hour to where they will have some power outages in the Tallahassee area. I also want to note, though, as this hurricane weakens, it's going to spread out, and the main energy is going to go north and then northeastward. So notice that for those are the coastal counties, not even in what's called the cone of uncertainty, okay? But that's how close to still possibly getting near hurricane force conditions that we are, and that's why we are still under a hurricane warning. And note that although remember, the cone's going to shrink the closer we get to actual event. So now there's even less of Georgia. In fact, notice the coast of Georgia is not even under the cone of uncertainty now. But hopefully this makes the point that this is not the cone of damage. This is not the cone of concern as far as where the worst of the weather or where bad weather will be. There will be bad weather, and we'll leave it at that. We'll break it down for you off through Georgia and the Carolinas. Because remember, as this system gets up even in toward the Albany area and southwest of Atlanta, it's going to be down to about 30 to 35 miles per hour and will quickly lose a lot of its rain. Whereas the potential wind gust to over 60 and severe weather and very heavy rains, that's going to work up through the coastal plains of Georgia and the Carolinas. I think this accumulated rainfall map does a pretty good job of showing you the motion of the heavier rains, and then they will be spreading northeastward as opposed to westward. Look at Tallahassee's right here. But Tallahassee on the dry side of the hurricane, so rainfall totals not really much going on there, maybe an inch, maybe 2 inches, whereas these are totals of over a foot, which pretty much supports what we've been talking about. So here's a look at the hurricane. I don't think it takes me to say, you know, so this is the landmass, and so that eye is gradually pulling away. All hurricanes wobble. You hear that term, all hurricanes wobble, so I must hesitate to say that. It seems to be a bit repetitive, but they sometimes appear to be wobbling more than they actually are, because typically hurricanes have 2 to 3 vortices, sometimes 5, within the eye. And as one vortice intensifies, another one is weakening as they go around. And so what you're actually seeing here on the satellite is not one eye wobbling around, it's several vortices within the eye. But overall, that main core is now, I think, clearly moving west-northwestward. The feeling, the forecast is that before first light in Key West, that's when they're going to have the worst that this hurricane has to offer. But they may get both sides. They may get the strong northeast winds. Strong is not enough, is it? They'll have winds of possibly gusting over 150 from the northeast, and then may have winds immediately come around to the south and southeast as the eye possibly could go right over the Keys, which of course is worst case scenario. We'll keep you updated on what's going to happen down south. But with this new advisory, what's it mean for us? No real change, folks. No real change. If anything, because it's once again been tracked, forecasted, edged a few miles farther to west, that maybe causes slightly less of these events, but there will be isolated wind gusts to 70 miles per hour. And remember, 60 is your threshold for beginning of wind damage. We're going to focus on these rainfall totals. I'm just talking about the rainfall totals of late Sunday through Monday. We've had the nor'easter rains of the last now 2 days, and we'll continue to have them in early Sunday before the main event arrives. So rainfall totals will be a problem. Now, for those of you new to the area, the St. John's, 95% of its rise is because of the storm surge. So that's what we're going to watch. But because so much of the drainage in Duval County, so much, not all of it, but so much depends on what the ocean is doing. Because then if the ocean comes up 5 feet, the intercoastal comes up 5 feet, the St. John's comes up 5 feet, all the creeks and estuaries come up 5 feet. And the higher that is, then the less that this can drain, and street flooding becomes a big problem. And street flooding maybe starts backing up into driveways and whatnot. We'll watch that closely. But that's why, number one, 2 to 5 is not catastrophic. Down south is catastrophic, but 2 to 5 in combination with rainfall totals will cause some drainage problems. Much more to talk about, but for now, we're going to take a break.